Until recently, I had avoided many of the giants that the analog horror subgenre was built off of. This all changed when I finally made my video revisiting Local 58. Today, I aim to keep my promise and continue the trend by revisiting another legend, Gemini Home Entertainment by Remy Abode. This series is one of the most layered, complex, and impressive projects I've ever covered on the channel. There's so many interesting and important details that can get completely missed on a first, second, or even third watch. But I genuinely feel that the full story of Gemini Home Entertainment deserves to be told. So if that sounds like a good time to you, then grab your hiking gear and brave the forests with me as we face celestial horrors beyond our comprehension. And remember, do not answer the knocking at the door. If we go by the playlist for Gemini Home Entertainment, which seems to be the intended watch order, the first episode is technically channel surfing. However, I'm actually going to skip this because it's more of a trailer than an actual episode, and I honestly believe it sort of ruins some key reveals that are better left unknown until later on. There's also another episode that was cut from the series entirely called The Deep Blue, so I'm just not going to talk about that one at all. Naturally, this takes us to the first episode in the release order, World's Weirdest Animals. The tape begins with the Gemini logo, a multicolored planet with bright yellow text superimposed above it. Then we're given the program's title, World's Weirdest Animals. Though really it focuses specifically on rural Minnesota, at least for this episode, beginning with Wilkin County. We start off with the greater prairie chicken, which is noted for their unusual air sacs, ear-like feathers, and unusual tendency to dive into snow during the winter to stay warm. How weird. Next we move on to Clay County for animal number 2, the burrowing owl. Their quirky quality is evident by their name. They prefer to make their nests underground as opposed to higher up like most birds. The next animal appears to be native to everywhere. The following footage doesn't really seem to be showing anything at all, pointing in a random direction facing the snowy forest. Even still, we get a name for animal number 3, woodcrawlers. While presumably viewing the tracks they left behind, we're told that they are excellent hunters, capable of treading most terrain without making a single sound. As if that wasn't enough, their preferred nesting locations are inside the homes of large families, apparently because they're easier for large swarms to adapt to. You will hear screaming. They stole their voices. Burn the bodies, lest they stand up again. After an unknown amount of time, our mysterious observer positions the camera just outside of the laundry room window, likely just to see if anyone's home. But something just isn't right. The subtitle below the frame contains 2 words, Nature's Mockery. Later that night, perhaps returning or perhaps never having left at all, the observer attempts to investigate, this time having plenty of reason to exercise caution. As they circle the house, we get to peer into a room with 2 people, though if what we've been led to believe is true, they're certainly not people anymore. From another angle, we see another one of them opening and closing their mouth in a strange manner, all the while remaining otherwise motionless. The caption then decides now is an appropriate time to call them fake people. Like, yeah, no kidding, dude. After this, we finally get to see one of them moving, but it's so wrong. They don't have like a normal up and down bob of a person's stride. They just kind of glide across the ground. While recording through yet another window, the observer is finally spotted by one of these fake people after they quickly round a corner, stopping in their tracks to observe and then breaking into a sprint towards the window. We hear them attempt to run away, but the footage cuts off before we can find out anything else, returning to the program title, of World's Weirdest Animals. The tape ends just as it began, on the Gemini Home Entertainment logo. First off, let's talk about Gemini Home Entertainment. Not the series, the company. Rather than being a live TV channel like something in Local 58, Gemini is a video distribution company. The planet shown in the Gemini logo is Neptune, and the word Gemini is likely referring to the constellation of the twins. It could also be a reference to the Gemini Observatory. You're gonna learn pretty quickly that the creator of the series really likes space. A concerning thing to note here as well is that woodcrawlers are described as being everywhere in Minnesota. At least I certainly hope they're confined to Minnesota. You can keep them, we don't want them. They also leave fake people behind in their wake. I can understand why they'd be referred to as a mockery of nature. They're absolutely horrifying. You have to wonder though, why would someone be willing to risk this kind of danger just to get this on video? What kind of person is recording this footage? The next video is titled Storm Safety Tips, which is brought to us by a company named Harbinge Technologies. The tape starts off fairly benign, informing us of the dangers of being caught unprepared for a storm and instructing us to reinforce our home in various ways. This is step 1. Step 2 talks about installing an early warning system, and Harbinge recommends their own product, the albedo alarm. This is all well and good. However, it's in step 3 that the instructions become oddly specific. 10 by 18 feet, an 8-inch minimum solid concrete foundation, and a strange aluminum hemisphere in the center of the room. It follows this up by adding another oddly specific instruction, the presence of a shortwave radio within 4 to 5 feet of the hemisphere. And once again, Harbinge recommends their own brand for the radio. We're then told to only use it in case of an emergency, insisting in a concerning fashion. From there, the tape moves on to part 2, what to do during a storm. We're told to escort our families to the shelter quietly. It then follows up by saying our home no longer belongs to us. We are then advised to turn on the shortwave radio, but for some reason we have to ignore anything that comes through it because it's an auditory hallucination. Step 3 says to remain calm as our tears are filled with salt. And finally, we reach part 3, what to do after a storm. After exiting the bunker and surveying for damage, we should check our homes for movement should they be severely damaged. If we hear a chime, it means the storm has passed and we are safe. But there's one more catch. Look to the field. Do you see lights? Return to your bunker. Listen, under your feet, crawling through the floor. And just like that, the strange cautionary tape ends. Okay, first of all, what the hell are those things? And then we have this new company named Harbinge selling some storm safety equipment, but this doesn't seem like any type of storm that I'm familiar with, and I live in Florida. The name Harbinge obviously connects with the word harbinger, which is someone who warns people that something is coming. Though in older uses of the word, it actually meant someone who went ahead of the group to secure lodging. I'm certainly not a big fan of either implication, but especially not that second one. And why on earth would you need to be quiet if the concern was a weather event? This whole video makes a lot more sense if you swap the word storm with swarm. As for the albedo alarm, the term albedo refers to a surface's ability to reflect sunlight, which is commonly used as a descriptor for celestial bodies. Like I said, Remy definitely really likes space. Moving on, the storm shelter certainly has some concerning attributes. There's a radio you shouldn't turn on for some reason, and if you do turn it on, you shouldn't listen to it for some reason. There's a weird dome and walls that have to be at least 8 inches thick for some reason, and based on what we know, it seems like the woodcrawlers are taking over someone's home here, and the shelters are basically a way to prevent your entire family from getting skinwalkered. But these things? I don't think those are woodcrawlers. In artificial computer learning, we get introduced to another company named Regnad Computing. The point of the tape is to document and demonstrate the advancements in artificial computer learning they've made. Using what they call revolutionary methods, the company has managed to make massive strides after 4 years of work, producing the world's most advanced AI. I certainly hope they used normal and conventional means to acquire such advanced technology. To demonstrate, the AI was tasked with making a children's storybook with 3 iterations to show the machine's thought process. The first of these iterations reads, "Jack leapt over the river. Mary to follow, together. Travel, follow the secret. Jack the river, it is dead." Clearly, this iteration is unrefined, but it begins to make more sense with the second one, which says, "Jack leapt over the river. Mary followed close behind. They are searching for the secret place. I hear you." As concerning as iteration 2 is, unfortunately, iteration 3 doesn't do much to feel less foreboding. Jack leapt over the river. There goes Mary down the stream. The secret place will keep us safe. The river flows, but not with water. And if you thought that one was bad, the AI then makes another iteration unprompted. Jack heard it again. There is a voice from space. Jack, do you see me? I have become something else. After this, the following slide is blank. And then we get an additional message. Listen to the silver box. The stars are moving now. Do you see the hungry eye? Here I am. And after all that, the tape comes to a conclusion, with Regnad noting that they hope to have this technology ready for commercial use within a year. And that's it. I'll be the first to say that Regnad's AI tech is a little too impressive for the time period this is set in. And I think it's really important to emphasize just how impressive, or maybe terrifying depending on your perspective, it is that this AI grew so quickly. Even within the first iteration, the AI is already using literary devices like metaphors, even if the grammar's not quite there. And by the time it starts producing unprompted iterations, it has practically fixed the problem already. And the only reason I bring it up is because there is a lot of symbolism here. The recurring one is the river or stream, which I think is a reference to the river Styx, which represents death. Jack leaps over the river, escaping death, but Mary, on the other hand, falls down the stream, which flows not with water, and the implication is probably blood. There's also a reference to a secret place that should keep them safe, which, as far as we know, is a reference to the bunker. Which makes sense because we also hear about a silver box, which is definitely just the shortwave radio. As for the hungry eye and the events that happen towards the end, I think it would make the most sense if we save that speculation for the next video, as we're about to discover some very interesting things about our solar system. As you'd probably expect, our solar system serves as an educational tape meant to showcase the major celestial bodies we can find in our little corner of the galaxy, along with some fun facts about them. We start from the Sun, making our way in order of increasing distance from it. The coverage from Mercury to Earth is mostly normal, though it does say that Earth is one of the only planets in the solar system capable of supporting life. Just feels like a bit of an odd way to phrase that. Once we get to Mars, we see something sneaking up in the background, a bizarre bluish circle, which causes the footage to distort before vanishing as quickly as it appeared. The strangeness doesn't stop there, though, as Jupiter, next in the order, has its famous red spot briefly described as not an eye, but an open wound. Then with Saturn, its rings are ominously referred to as the Gateway. In the corner, Neptune can briefly be seen drifting behind Saturn before the video abruptly cuts to Uranus, though apparently the planet that's constantly the butt of the joke lacks any sort of involvement in whatever horrific eldritch nightmare we're living through right now. However, the same cannot be said for Neptune. A large storm rages in the planet called the Great Dark Spot. It is the lens. Neptune has been mutated. Under normal circumstances, you'd likely expect Pluto to follow Neptune in the order, but you'd be wrong. In this universe, it's the Iris. It is with us now, laughing at us. Behold. We are shown a brilliant beam of light blasting out from the dark spot on Neptune's surface. We see it make its way across the solar system, but we don't get to see where it ends up, as we get interrupted by Pluto jump scare. Like Uranus, Pluto has nothing unusual about it. It's just your average planet. Well, not really a planet, but you get what I mean. Sorry if I offended any Pluto enjoyers out there. And from there, the tape ends. Okay, so now we know the logo of Gemini Home Entertainment being Neptune wasn't a random thing. It actually, meant something. Okay. Pushing the Neptune beam to the side for now, it seems strange that Jupiter's red spot was called an open wound. And make sure to keep the part about Saturn's rings being the gateway in mind as well. Unlike Jupiter, Neptune's dark spot is allowed to be eye-related, as it gets described as the lens. And don't even get me started on the fact that Neptune, a planet, is mutated. And I have a feeling this freaky eyeball is responsible for that. Neptune then shoots the beam in the direction of some other planets. In the previous video, we saw a visual of what looked like Neptune beaming a creature down to Earth. I think we can safely assume that the Iris, the woodcrawlers, and the lights that we saw in the field are all connected. But if we want a better idea of exactly what's going on, we'll just have to continue our journey. To follow up our solar system, Gemini Home Entertainment graces us with something a little more down to earth: camp information video. It begins by introducing us to a setting that will be crucial going forward: the Moonlight Acres Family Camp, established in the year 1930. Since our founding, Moonlight Acres has been devoted to family and creating memories. Our campground is as pristine and beautiful as ever, a relic from the past. Many of the original camp buildings remain untouched since the initial closure. Let's look at some of the activities our camp has to offer. And naturally, we then see a list of activities. This includes hiking, archery with more extravagant targets every year, whatever that means, canoeing, and oh, what the fuck, man. Yeah, if you thought even for a second this was going to be a normal-ass camp, you're a little silly. Anyways, let's learn about their accommodations. They've got these cute little cabins, some larger, burrow-free family cabins. Maybe it's just the owls from earlier. A gender-separated kids cabin with fun activities all year round. Oh look, it even has a shelter. Oh. Then there's the rustic cabin, which looks like it wouldn't even survive an inspection. Last but not least of the accommodations is their Harbinge brand albedo alarm, described as "Do not answer the knocking at the door." The third and final section of the tape is titled Mythos. In 1935, rumors of well-dressed strange men visiting camp made rounds. They asked to enter the administrator's cabin every night for years. One night, a deal was made, and they never appeared again. Another popular myth from the 30s involved sightings of skinwalkers. Adam Levitch, men's club supervisor, answered door. Barry Johnson, assistant activity supervisor. Truman Michaels, answered door. Bethany Newman, Alec Davison, Dorothy Bates, and this is what asked to enter. You guys have no idea how much information was just packed in here. In this video, we were introduced to Moonlight Acres Family Camp, established all the way back in 1930. And for reference, most of the series takes place in or after the 80s, so that's a pretty damn long time ago. After being closed for some amount of time, Moonlight Acres is back in business. I wonder why they were closed in the first place. Okay, let's talk about those activities. No, not those activities, those activities. If lights in the field were supposed to be a bad sign, I'd hate to know how bad it is when they're in the sky. I certainly hope they don't get into the sea next. That'd be a big problem. Also, why on earth is this event called Harvest? In general, there seems to be a really odd juxtaposition between the camp's preparedness and what actually happens. Obviously, the advertisement side of the video is trying to spin the narrative and claim that they've fixed the problem, but it really doesn't seem like they have. Onto the mythos section. This is the first time we've heard about this deal, and it will not be the last time. Also, the skinwalkers mentioned here are probably just the woodcrawlers, given what we know about them. It's just what people were calling them at the time. Finally, we have the vessels section. Let's play a guessing game. One of these people is easily the most important of the bunch. If you guess correctly, you might get a cookie. No promises though. I definitely can't even begin to explain what the vessels actually are yet, but just keep in mind that these are all park staff, and all of them have quote-unquote answered the door. Oh, and this little friend is the one who asked to enter. We'll get to that eventually. And I absolutely love these last shots. You have no way of knowing it now, but this might be one of the most important episodes of Gemini Home Entertainment. I know that there's a number of questions that may still come to mind about this episode. Why are the lights in the sky made into an event if they're dangerous? Why was the camp reopened if it's dangerous? Do the camp organizers have malicious intent? Is that part of the deal that was made? Should I answer the knocking at the door? No, the answer is no. This next tape marks a turning point in Gemini Home Entertainment, as we see a commercial for a video game, Lethal Omen. Advertised as having intense action, challenging puzzles, and high-quality graphics. It costs $29.99 plus tax and is available on Regnad computers. An important thing to note here is that it appears to take place at the camp we just learned about. We get some gameplay footage and are told that the game uses revolutionary artificial intelligence as a basis for its game engine. The gameplay footage ends concerningly as we see the iris looming in the sky, staring down at us, and the game is available now in stores worldwide. The idea of a game portraying Moonlight Acres and being included within the series at all is really cool. Do you know what's even cooler? The fact that you can actually play the game for yourself. There are multiple endings and a lot of important pieces of information to discover. I'm going to be going over all of the important findings and explaining the gameplay and 5 different endings. Upon opening the game, we're greeted with 3 logos. First, Gemini Home Entertainment, then Regnad Computing, and finally, ACL by Regnad. Then we get to see the Lethal Omen logo as the gorgeous graphics of the forest rotate around it. So, let's press start, shall we? The first part of the game has us collecting 3 keys in order to get past the gate. Near one key, we can see a radio. Upon entering the camp, we see the bulletin, which contains information on the Lights in the Sky event at 9:30 p.m., and a reminder to bring our sieve. Heading into the first cabin on the right, we see a bed, a small computer, some videotapes, a couch, and a dresser with a radio next to it. They also have a familiar tape of storm safety tips. The first cabin on the left is a similar setup, but they also have some kind of headset on the couch. and a tape for some kind of machine. The second cabin on the right is similar, but this one has 2 headsets, some unmarked cases for tapes, and a little machine next to the computer. On the screen, we can see it says, "Connect the sleep image visualizer to your computer using the cord provided." On the dresser, we can see an albedo alarm setup video, which we haven't actually seen before, unlike storm safety tips. The second cabin on the left has a headset and a tape on their bed, and the same screen on their computer. The third cabin on the right has its computer in the corner, due to the giant, terrifying crack in the floor. And if you click it, you'll see a strange image, followed by the words, "Sleep Image Visualization, Adam Levitch." It began at 1:17 a.m. on July 29th and ended just 1 minute later. It looks kinda like a bent-over tree with the sun setting behind it. Weird.
Wait a minute. Adam Levitch? Why does that name ring a bell?
The third cabin on the left is an absolute mess. Everything has been flipped over. Moving past the cabins, we can see a sign pointing forward for archery, and to the right for the family cabins. We aren't allowed to enter the family cabins though, so that means it's time for archery. And remember, the targets get more extravagant every year. After shooting all of them, the screen flashes, all enemies dead. On the ground near the targets, you can see 2 newspaper pages. The first page describes the abrupt cancellation of the Lights in the Sky event, which apparently many people travel to the camp solely for every year. They gave no explanation and politely declined a request for an interview with the Times. The second page describes the disappearance of Jordan Barnes, only one case in a string of recent disappearances. Investigators question if it is some form of mass hysteria, as they all appear to have left of their own will. Moving past the targets, we can see an albedo alarm and a bunker hatch. More enemies appear, and more enemies are killed. Continuing down this path, we come across a ring of tree-textured spikes with a strange clump in the middle. The game screen brings up its usual warning to kill all enemies again, but no enemies are found, and then it says the enemies are dead. Okay. Further examining the strange clump, we can see a human arm inside. In the distance, another enemy limps towards us, but trying to shoot it this time around yields no results. The screen just says, "Run." And then we find ourselves in a familiar storm safety shelter with the radio and aluminum hemisphere. Despite the concrete walls, a woodcrawler makes its way in, knocks the lantern down, and the lights go dim. But the aluminum hemisphere lights up the room with a faint glow, and the threat seems to be gone. And suddenly, we're taken out of the bunker. Time has clearly passed. From this point, we make our way back to the camp entrance until we hear this. We approach the sunset and we can see the source of the screams. Our gun is out of ammo, but luckily the figure remains still. Finally, turning our attention to the sun, we can see it slowly becomes eclipsed by a gigantic object, which we can only assume is the iris. And then, we win! Hooray! What? So that was the normal ending. I mean, it didn't feel too normal to me, but there's a lot of things here that don't really make sense at face value, so let's dive a little deeper. The first thing I want to talk about is something you can notice pretty much immediately, and although it's very gamified and turned into a puzzle, Moonlight Acres is locked and closed, and whoever you're playing as has to gather keys just to get in the front gate. And on top of that, there's no one around except for these people that try to kill you. Considering the disappearances we learn about and the fact that the player has a handgun, we're probably playing as a cop. Next thing to note is the Sleep Image Visualizer, or the SIV. I think we can intuit pretty safely that these are used to record dreams on VHS tapes. But why you'd want to do that, and why it's seemingly mandatory for everyone to use them, we don't know. I also want to dive deeper into the newspapers on the ground. The Lights in the Sky event, which we just learned about in the previous entry, was cancelled by the camp with seemingly no notice or explanation. And this contrasts the note that we saw on the bulletin at the beginning of the game, though this could just be an old note. It's also strange that despite how dangerous the event sounds given our knowledge, It's extremely popular, and a lot of people travel to the camp just for that. There's also the other paper that details the disappearances of multiple people that seemingly are caused by some kind of mass hysteria. No clue what that's about. There's also that one enemy that was like stuck in a plant in the forest clearing. Didn't really seem like he could do anything, so that's a little strange. The last thing that I found odd was basically the entire sequence with the bunker, because not only did it not work, but for some reason the hemisphere lit up and seemingly saved the player character from the danger they were in. Now, I could try to say more, but the game has 4 other endings, so let's move on to the whole ending. So the game starts the same every time, but exploring down to the end of the road, we can see a fallen sign that says Moonlight Acres main entrance next left. Alongside it is a flipped over car, which tells us that something catastrophic happened here, as if we didn't already know that. There's also a weird looking tree statue thing in the distance. More on that soon. Speedrunning through the keys and first set of enemies, it is at this point that we deviate from the normal ending's path. If you hit all 7 archery targets and head back, the rock blocking the weird statue is gone, and you can enter. There's a secret little path among the trees, and then it takes you to this. Alright, may as well. This time it says game over, rather than you win. Yeah, so kind of more questions than answers on this one. The big one is the hole, right? Like, did something burrow into the earth or come out of the earth? Is this where the wood crawlers come from? Does it have something to do with the blast from Neptune? Then there's the weird tree thing in the clearing that led to the hole in the first place. We really don't know what any of this is right now. It makes more sense to just move on to the mannequin ending. For the beginning, we repeat the same exact steps. This time, when we deviate, we head to the administrator's cabin instead. We can see shelves filled with tapes, as well as some pictures on the walls that seem to be old camp activities. There's also a picture that references the L is real theory from Super Mario 64, which I think is pretty cool. Also present is a camp staff group photo from 1984, or at least I think it's 1984. It's a bit hard to read. We can enter a bedroom, but there isn't much in it. Now for the important part. After some very easy parkour, you get into this room filled with a concerning amount of computers, a wall entirely filled with tapes, and some notes on the ground that can also be read. It says, "It is looking into me, wants to eat the camp. I fear the men may return. My face is going away. I hear voices. The spot on my neck has grown. There is a bonfire tonight. I will stay in my bedroom. Lights in the sky is tonight. I've been told that the men will be present. Maybe it will leave us alone now." After reading these notes, we turn around to leave, but someone else is here with us. Its head follows our player as we move, and touching it results in this. Another game over. All these stockpiled computers and tapes lead me to believe that the camp has been using the sleep image visualizers for quite some time, but why they'd need to stockpile the excess, we have no clue. Then there's the notes on the ground, whose writer doesn't appear to have been having a very good time at all. Not only were they suffering symptoms of a weird infectious disease, but they also had anxieties regarding men visiting the camp. Perhaps the well-dressed deal-making men that we learned about. Despite being half a century after their first appearance, they still seem to have influence over the camp and may be related to whatever wants to eat the camp. And I know, you're probably wondering, why mannequins? Well, guess what? I don't know. But considering the surrounding context, it's highly likely they have something to do with the well-dressed men. Things are starting to get a little more interesting. Let's move on to the crash ending. Alright, for the crash ending, speedrun through the game again, and this time crawl up this spike and do some parkour to get this special key. Take your new key and run back to the road. Among the trees is a target you can shoot at, which opens up the barrier that was previously blocking the rest of the road. We see a police car that has crashed into the wall. Maybe the other car we saw earlier was also a police car? As we continue walking, the game gets mad and says, "You are not meant to be here." We see a sign for "Profit" in 48 kilometers, and a strange crying face appears on the screen and shakes until eventually the game crashes. To me, the presence of these police vehicles reinforces the idea that we may be playing as a police officer in the game. Now, why we're here could be for a multitude of reasons. We could be looking for the missing people that were described in the newspaper, we could be looking for the cops that came before us, or we could just be investigating why Moonlight Acres is suddenly empty. Whatever our purpose may be, it's clear that we're not welcome here, even being told directly that we're not meant to be here. Obviously, there's also the meta aspect of the statement to consider since we were technically out of bounds, but clearly there's something a little bit deeper going on here. And unfortunately, things are only going to get worse for our player character. Much worse. Let's move on to the seance ending. Now we only have one ending left. Collect the keys, shoot the enemies, shoot the targets, grab the special key, and return to the strange tree statue from earlier. But this time, rather than it being empty, we're met with a lineup of the enemy models, all staring in our direction. We walk down the aisle and make our way to the statue. Creaking and pained screams are heard. The screen displays a game over. But this time, rather than respawning on the road, we find ourselves on a path. It's dark now, and our surroundings are different. Our player no longer makes sound when they walk. As we walk this path, we see a sign on the tree that reads, "Shifting Tendons Shape Anatomy." There are fewer livestock now. As we progress, we read some text across a second sign. "Wretched hands tap my window. A stranger's fangs scrape the walls." Peeking through a patch of trees, we can see more people standing. With silent footsteps, we approach the cabin and knock. On the walls, we see another sign. The floorboards creak while I sleep. Growing cracks leak with red. And another. The field has eyes burning deep. They are becoming restless. Finally, we approach a room with a screen. A video is playing that appears to show a very large planet next to a much smaller one. When we turn around, the game says kill all enemies once again. We're now being watched from the corridor. Looking back to the video, it now shows a blue planet. The people continue to stare. And finally, the screen displays the room we're currently in, and in the place we're standing, rather than a human, we see a woodcrawler. The exit to the room disappears. A new game over screen appears, this one with a picture of the Earth. Behind it, another planet arises, this one unfathomably larger. It's the Iris, which marks game over for Earth. So, did you get all that? Good. Let's move on. Kidding. I'm kidding. First order of business, we just learned about a ritual that turns people into woodcrawlers. Or at least that's certainly what it appeared to be, and that's, pretty horrible. This ending has also had me thinking, just based on the tone of the final scene, whether or not woodcrawlers that originate from humans have any sense of humanity left. Because it's almost like our character didn't even understand until they saw like their reflection in the screen that they had been turned into one. Maybe even their tendency to invade homes and turn families into fake people is some kind of twisted, desperate way to try and become human again, and if that's true, Jesus. Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned yet is all of the signs leading up to the last room in the map, but I'm gonna circle back to that later. And with that, we've covered every ending that Lethal Omen has to offer, and we have scoured basically every goddamn corner of the game for hints as to what's going on within Gemini Home Entertainment. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of things that are left to mystery, but we're gonna have to keep going in order to find the answers. Returning to the playlist, our next order of business is Wilderness Survival Guide. Wilderness Survival Guide is a tape that is pretty much exactly what it appears to be. It was created by Jack Wilder, who shares a first name with one of the characters from the storybook. The cassette begins with the essentials, detailing basic equipment to bring along, common hazards to avoid, and even advice regarding the legal repercussions of trespassing private property while in the wilderness. It then delves further into, more specifically, what should be actively avoided, describing what to do during an animal encounter. The example shows a human silhouette and a bear, and goes through all the general steps. Don't run, don't look away, raise your voice if it gets too close, blah blah blah. What the fuck is that thing? Okay, we're just going to ignore that. Plant life. Poison ivy, water hemlock, that's pretty normal. Nature's mockery. Oh, so that's what that was. Apparently, we've got some sounds to avoid too. Alright, whatever. Number 1, coyote howls. Number 2, cougar screams. Alright, let's see it. Well, auditory hallucination. Then there's this great line at the end of the section. If you hear them, they have already heard you. Very helpful. Finally, the last section instructs us on how to build a campfire. Makes sense, right? It's probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think wilderness survival. It details some basic materials like kindling, matches, and logs, and once those steps are done, you can light your fire. Oh, well, this guy's having a bit of trouble. That's alright though, here's some helpful instructions for if your fire doesn't start. Step 1. Follow the lights. Some time passes, and our cameraman hears something familiar. Reasonably, he investigates the source of the noise, but what he finds doesn't seem to be a real person at all. Whatever it actually is, it doesn't appear to be in any real distress, kind of just stumbling around, perhaps trying to lure someone in. The following section educates us on how to deal with an infected wound, detailing 3 equally normal procedures to deal with the problem. Wash with soap and water, use antibiotic ointment, and forcefully rip foreign object from body. We then zoom in on what appears to be the same fake person from before, this time seen from the window of a home that no longer belongs to them. So, we now have 2 characters named Jack and 2 separate people who have gone out of their way to record fake people inside of their homes. Call me crazy, but I think these might all be the same guy. If we assume this to be the case, it really does make a lot of sense for a wilderness expert / videographer to have followed the strange tracks in the snow while recording. It wasn't exactly common for someone to carry a camera with them in this time period, so this could easily explain why that footage is available for us to see. This episode also marks the first payoff from Lethal Omen, with the auditory hallucination from the fake person matching the sound exactly. We also learn about what seems to be a plant called Nature's Mockery, which not only matches something we saw all the way back in the first episode, but also matches another thing that we saw in Lethal Omen. But wait, I thought wood crawlers were Nature's Mockery. Well, kinda, but not really. It'll make more sense later. The last thing I want to bring up is the tape's mention of an infection, which reminds me of the symptoms the anonymous writer was having in the game. But considering the mention of ripping a foreign object out of your body, it very well may be a lot bigger of a problem than we currently realize. And one last thing to keep in mind before we move on, the bear. Remember the bear. Our next video is brought to you by our good friends over at Harbinge Technologies. It serves as an introduction and setup guide to the sleep image visualizer that we learned about in Lethal Omen. We start with some basic information about the module and headset, including the headset's aluminum dome. After plugging in the headset and module to your personal computer, you're instructed to run the Civ home use software. The instructions are interrupted briefly as we see the Civ footage of someone named Levi Jacobs from 5:24 to 5:30 a.m. on December 12th. There's a shadowy figure with a humanoid head peeking from behind a doorway. Returning to the instructions, we learn that the module will record automatically, and Harbinge wishes us a good night. Thanks, Harbinge. The calm music begins to distort, and suddenly the video cuts again. This time, we see the Civ footage of Adrian Gordon from 4:06 to 4:10 a.m. on June 24th. This visualizer shows a view of a planetarium, with the strange-looking machine being a planetarium projector. There is also some reversed audio, which I will play now.
This part we call a hot trajectory, or high energy hot because it does dip inside of Earth's orbit.
Returning to the Civ introduction video, we're told to check our computer for the fully rendered sleep image visualization. They thank us and inform us that all Civs are legal property of Harbinge. Invasion of privacy aside, we're treated to one last Civ from someone named Jack Dean, beginning at 3 a.m. on May 6th and ending at 6:17 p.m. 3 days later. We see a man in jeans and a buttoned shirt lying down, with one of the well-dressed men standing at the foot of the bed. When the well-dressed man sits down, the neck and head appear to resemble the mannequins from Lethal Omen. We then hear knocking at the door, which is interrupted. The tape reminds us that the Civ simply takes images from the unconscious mind and visualizes them. The images do not represent reality. And finally, we're told that dreams cannot tell the future. Our instructional tape is interrupted one last time. This final Civ shows a beautiful scene of a sunset. Oh no. Well, I certainly hope dreams can't tell the future. So, it seems like this reinforced basically everything we were able to intuit about the sleep image visualizers from the game, minus one crucial detail: the aluminum hemisphere being part of the headset. Since we know what this component does in a shelter, we can assume that it's meant to do the same thing on the headset, protect you from the iris in some way. But arguably the biggest revelation from this episode is the name Jack appearing once again, this time with the last name Dean. So either there's two Jacks or he just has a nickname, and I think you know which one it is. The next tape is brought to us by a new company, Optica Video. This one is geared towards kids in need of some new fun games to play. Let's see what classic games Optica has in store for us. Game 1 is Hide and Go Seek. Now that's a classic. But just in case we forgot, it tells us the rules and then shows us a demonstration using a picture of a living room. Game 2 is Freeze Tag, with another very normal demonstration. This time looking from the living room into a room with a nicely set table. Game 3 is Sardines, this time in the dining room. This game ends when everyone is hiding together. Game 4 is Feed the Woods. You are instructed to wait until dark when your parents have fallen asleep and sneak outside very quietly with your friends. The video tells you then to go into the woods, walk until you cannot see the lights anymore, and scream at the top of your lungs. Seems like pretty normal kid activity to me. This time, rather than the photos being from within a home, they are outside the home, in the forest. One of the red arrows from earlier points to a tree. But then, the crying overlay from Lethal Omen appears, and we get almost a buzzer-like sound effect, almost like it was telling us what we did was incorrect. And this strange procedure repeats in a different place each time. The next image has us looking up past the treetops and into the sky where we see a strange glowing light. The arrow points to this as well. The next arrow points to the darkness beyond a tree, and the crying face reappears. The sun has begun to rise. and we see the silhouette of a police car with its lights flashing. The red arrow points to it, and the face appears again, this time without tears. The game ends when the forest is fed. The final image we see is a view of Earth from space. The red arrow points to it. Found you. This video's tone completely shifts when it introduces Game 4, and not just because the game itself is concerning. Rather than being an impersonal demonstration video, it becomes a very targeted set of instructions addressing you personally, which I just thought was kind of an eerie detail considering it's clearly targeting children. And the funny thing is, even the first 3 games aren't off the hook either, because each game has some kind of parallel to something that we've seen in the series. People hide from wood crawlers in their bunkers during storms, they can be paralyzed or frozen by nature's mockery, and the game Sardines has a bunch of people grouping together. Huh, I wonder what that last one could mean. This episode is really good at storytelling even with the minimalist style that it takes, like this scene with the cop car for example. We see the sun rising with the forest in the background. Obviously this is the morning after where the parents realize their kids are missing, so the cops come out to look for them, and then the car just gets eaten by what I assume to be a wood crawler. And then the text at the bottom, of course, says the game ends when the forest is fed. And here the forest really is just a representation of this supernatural force that the iris and everything working for it is. And that feeling of futility compounds with the final shot of the episode, which is a reference to the game over screen where the iris looms over Earth. And even just the mere inclusion of the cop car along with this weird crying overlay thing that we've seen before, this is all a callback to the Crash ending. And I'm sure you're probably sitting here wondering as well why this random company made a video telling kids to go out in the woods and get eaten. And I really wish I could answer that question for you, but I can't tell you yet. So, we're just gonna move on to the next episode, Advanced Mining Vehicle. In this video, we have another new company, Northern Alberta Mining and Development, or NAMAD. Our Canadian friends will be showing us the future of mining technology, the Remote Operated Compact Tunneler, or ROCT. This vehicle is controlled via computer, so it doesn't have the same limitations as human exploration. It has a live video camera that can be controlled, and it can pivot as well as zoom in on important details while mining. Just look at this cool rock. The ROCT also has a microphone to listen for hazards such as running water or nests. The video feed then shows the vehicle stumbling upon an open area in which it pauses. At this time, the vehicle is stationed 39 meters below the surface. The camera locks onto a corner and zooms in. Strange clicking noises can be heard. And the video feed glitches as the ROCT is pulled to farther depths. The status blinks compromised for some time before the machine is able to reboot, now lying at depth 145. The video feed slowly loads back in, now showing a large cavern. But before we can explore much of this cavern, we're interrupted by some information regarding the battery. They made sure the battery was capable of rebooting, which was certainly necessary after what we just saw. Back to our show, we see what appears to be vines intertwined with the stalactites. The vehicle zooms in on a cluster of these vines before a horrifying sound is heard and the vehicle shakes. Blood pumps through the garden's veins. The crops mature. Our little ROCT has made its way to depth 151 now, where it examines more routes before turning to the right to see a familiar light. The vehicle gets tangled in a cluster of red roots at depth 164. It attempts to move, but to no avail.
Shifting tendons shape anatomy. Mutation of the heart. The vehicle zooms in ahead of us, and we watch as a woodcrawler emerges from the cluster of roots before we're abruptly dragged to unfathomable depths. Once it passes a depth of 579 meters, the signal is lost. And like nothing ever happened, the video concludes. You know, if I had a nickel for every time a long-limbed plant creature came out of a vine and tried to mimic humans in an effort to hunt and kill them, I'd have at least 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it happened twice. So what exactly is that thing? Clearly, they're not our typical woodcrawlers. These are gardeners. No, but seriously, the only reason why we know what they're called is because of the Makeship campaign. We've actually seen these guys quite a few times at this point, but this is the first time we not only get a really good look at them, but learn what they even do. And it seems like what they do is set up woodcrawler nests, affectionately called gardens. Not only does this episode serve as a deeper look into how the monsters of the series work in general, but considering the trend of every episode after Lethal Omen referencing the game in some way, I'm gonna say this is probably meant to tell us that the big hole we found in the woods was the entrance to a garden. And it makes sense for there to be one nearby. I mean, the existence of the Lights in the Sky event requires gardeners. If we can assume that everything in the series traces back to the Neptune beam, it seems like the gardeners were the first things to show up and have made all of the woodcrawlers as minions. It is a little confusing that we've seemingly been given 2 different ways that woodcrawlers can be made, and like I mentioned before, there might genuinely be a 3rd one, but I'll have to wait to tell you about that. And for those who were paying attention, you might have noticed that the term shifting tendons showed up again. I'm not going to talk about it yet. I'm sorry. Just give me some time. I promise the payoff is interesting. But enough about that. Let's move on to our next video. Deep root disease. With our next tape, the Gemini logo is, not doing too well. We're introduced to the Warner Area Department of Health, or WDH. Today they'll be informing us about something called deep root disease. Delightful. The video is split into a few different sections, including roots, contraction, bulbs, diagnosis, and sprouts. Let's start with roots. They form from bulbs and grow with increasing speed until they hit bone. After that, they're able to spread freely through the body. Okay, how about contraction? Oh, a demonstration. Lovely. Okay, now it's bulb time. Who doesn't love a good bulb? These are the first visible sign of deep root disease. They can range from 2 to 10 centimeters and can remain unnoticed for any amount of time. For the first few hours, they feel hollow. After that, they become solid and painful when pressure is applied. Then they become inflamed as rooting progresses, and you can get small sores around the area. Then it's time for sprouting. That's gross. Alright. Diagnosis. Don't worry guys, there's a very simple test. First, you check if there's any bulbs on the skin, any erratic muscle spasms, or unrecognizable smells. Okay. Then you can ask them simple questions. Do they remember their mother's name? Have they stopped dreaming? Do they feel new bones? If 4 or more of these tests describe an individual you know, they have become something else. Proceed with protective safety measures. Sprouts. Oh, are we not going to go over those protective safety measures? I'd really like to know about those. Man, where'd the music go? Is that what they meant by sprout? Oh, hey, it's the sleeping guy again. Oh, there he goes.
Well, it seems like the disease that one member of camp staff was experiencing was in fact deep root disease. The mention of a spot on their neck matches up directly. Although this educational tape conveniently does not tell us exactly how you'd actually contract the disease, or at the very least does so in a roundabout manner, it's obviously an iris-related affliction. And we actually get a big hint in this video. We're told that one of the symptoms for someone that has the disease is no longer dreaming, and that's like a bombshell because it gives us a very rational reason for the sieves to exist. And it also tells us why everyone in the camp had to use one, because they had to make sure that if anyone caught deep root disease, they would catch it immediately. And guess what? Someone at the camp did catch it. Another cool thing that happened in this video is the reintroduction of something that we haven't heard about in a long time, the idea of becoming something else. And that's from the 3rd episode. Now, I hate to keep doing this, but we're really not equipped to make this connection yet, but I promise it's really cool. Speaking of WRETCHED, I wonder how they're doing. Let's go ahead and check on their monthly progress report. Per usual, we begin with the Gemini logo, but once again, it's not quite right. Then we have the WRETCHED computing logo, which transitions into our monthly progress report. This report is specifically for something called Project Infrared. We begin by seeing some of the staff associated with the project and then learn that it is 84% complete. For some reason, the tape also specifies that the client is active and that communication is available. They've split the possible applications into 4 different categories, starting with computer processing. It seems like even just in the past month, they've been able to condense the size of their hardware by a ridiculous degree. And this has resulted in some familiar graphical advancements. The most interesting thing that they've used the ACL for, though, is predicting the future. First, they used it to predict future technological advancements to remain ahead of their competitors, and apparently their client has been helping them towards this goal. They've also been using the system to prevent technological errors that may occur in the future, and apparently they've already avoided 23 of these. Once again, they mention the invaluable help they've received from this mysterious client, even stating that they spearheaded the projects themselves. The final thing that they've done with the ACL system is communication. Throughout October, they've been recording their communications with their client via the ACL monitor room. They'll be showing those communications on this tape. Rather than being greeted by the expected image of a complicated and tidy computing system, we instead see a mess of vines infiltrating a few WRETCHED computers. They activate the transmitter array, an antenna that appears to have extra tendrils stretching out towards the sky. Their client is the iris. The speaking room comes online, and we return to the monitor room. They begin communication with the client by entering the prompt, Earth. They activate the speaker and a bright light appears in the sky to speak. They run iteration 1417. Mary sees the gateway die. Sleeping ones are eaten whole. The vessel floats into the maw. The jaw unhinges. It is prompted again with moonlight. New things roam the feeding grounds. The harbinger guards in vain. Mary hears a creaking sound. The hungry eye is welcomed. Finally, it's prompted one last time with the name Jack. It reads, "Jack is with us now," repeatedly. Before correcting itself to, "Jack is us now." Then the computers shut down and a shadow looms over the transmitter array. Communication has ended. We expect to meet our client in person in as little as 7 months.
Alright, it's time to address the elephant in the room. WRETCHED is just danger spelled backwards.
but that's really obvious. More importantly though, Regnad can also be rearranged to say garden. Slightly less obvious, but infinitely more interesting. And from what we can tell here, Regnad and the iris seem to have some kind of symbiotic relationship. The iris allows for Regnad to stay ahead of its competitors and make technological leaps that would have otherwise taken decades. But what does the iris stand to gain from this?
I feel like anything that the company could stand to do for the iris is something that the iris could do for itself with its existing capability. And if we roll with this assumption, it means the iris is capable of making very accurate predictions of the future, which is funny because just in Sleep Image Visualizer we were told that dreams cannot tell the future. And no longer having dreams is simultaneously a symptom of deep root disease. It is almost as if the narrative is trying to convey that the mere act of dreaming is the antithesis to the iris, which would be more evidence for Harbinge being basically the only force attempting to stop them with the Sleep Image Visualizers and the rest of their technology. I could be reaching with that, but if it's true, it's pretty impressive writing.
I'd also like to take a moment to analyze the messages, as it's probably the most important part of the episode. First, we have the message that came after the Earth prompt. The gateway that Mary sees die could refer to Saturn's rings, as this is what they're called in our solar system.
Not entirely sure how Saturn's rings could die, though.
And the next bit references people being eaten whole in their sleep, which could be an explanation for the crack in the floor of the cabins in Lethal Omen.
And at this point, we can use this and many other moments of the series to all tie into the idea that the woodcrawlers burrow and make tunnels underground.
Vessels have also been mentioned previously in camp information video, as we saw camp staff listed as vessels. But
here it says the vessel, clearly referring to one individual, and the use of the word maw implies getting trapped in some sort of mouth, whether that be figurative or literal.
And after this is the Moonlight prompt, likely referring to Moonlight Acres, of course. It says new things roam the feeding grounds. Somewhat of a mystery to me, honestly. The Harbinger guards in vain matches with what we know about the company Harbinge, as they seem to be attempting to thwart the iris somehow.
Mary hears a creaking sound, kind of draws a blank for me too. The hungry eye is clearly just another way to refer to the iris, but the fact that it's being welcomed is the interesting part. The only people we know that would welcome the iris to Earth are Regnad.
The last prompt, Jack, has the iris saying he is with us now, and then he is us now. I have a bad feeling that something terrible may have happened to Jack.
Despite the various implications we've received in this episode, I think the scariest part is the damning guarantee that the iris will be showing up in as little as 7 months. We really don't know whether or not Regnad understands the full scale of what they're doing and contributing to, but it doesn't really matter, does it? The iris is coming, whether they want it to or not.
This next episode is by far the most important one yet, simply titled Christmas Eve Party. It's been a while since we've been given a concrete year, but it seems like the Moonlight Acres family camp was operating in 1985. The tape coordinator is named Barry Johnson. Sounds familiar. And after that, we have 2 more familiar names, Jack and Mary, though this is the first time we get the last name Dean for Mary as well, implying that they are either related or married. There's also Bo Nadler doing photography.
We start with some cozy winter scenery captured by one of the videographers outside. Snow, trees, and the almost half moon in the distance. And then we see a beautifully decorated Christmas tree while party guests chatter. Oh, look, a snowman. You know, this is all shaping up to be one lovely party. But then the ground shakes outside, and inside we see the lights on the Christmas tree go out. Guests go quiet. Outside we hear terrifying noises from the forest. After a moment, though, music and chatter resume inside the house. Seemingly they are unaware of the danger just outside. We see a giant hand behind the trees.
It takes a step forward and strikes. The indoor videographer seems to be looking outside for something, perhaps wondering when their partner will return. We see large, swift tendrils slink along the snowy roof, and then it knocks. The camera points up at the ceiling as it creaks under the creature's weight, and the knocking becomes faster. A distorted human-sounding voice can be heard. The cameraman turns in time to catch a glimpse of the creature through a window, but it backs away once observed. The video closes with a series of lovely photos. The lakeside cabin, home of celebrations. Alex Whitler and videographer Jack Dean. Mary. Now that's what I call a Merry Christmas. So, Moonlight Acres organized a Christmas Eve party, either a routine yearly event or a celebration of their reopening. Though the party turned into a disaster, it's not entirely clear why or what even happened. What is clear, though, is that many people were harmed in the chaos, most notably Mary Dean. And if it hasn't been obvious already, the release order is not synonymous with the chronological order, which certainly hasn't helped in trying to piece it together. The reason why I mention this is because we kinda need to ask ourselves why Jack and Mary were even at this party in the first place. And in order to deduce this, I first need to introduce a new layer of evidence, the community posts, starting with offer. Here we see an ad posted in order to acquire a videographer for the party. We also see an offer relating to the Civ for $300 an hour for 13 hours of testing on the human subconscious. This is more than likely a public newspaper, so I feel like it's super unlikely that Jack and Mary were being targeted specifically in any way. I think they just happened to be the two people that showed up. I also want to show off a second post titled Mary. This shows us two pieces of paper. One is an old tattered invitation or Christmas card related to the party. On it are the signatures of staff, including Eileen Rafferty, Dorothy Bates, Jean and Alec Davison, Barry Johnson, C. Hoyt, and Alexander Whitler. Of these names, we recognize Dorothy, Barry, and one of the two Davisons, all people labeled as vessels. As for the second paper under the invitation, it appears to be an article that describes the subsequent aftermath of the party, with Mary's photo being featured alongside a man named Lloyd Michaels. This man shares a last name with Truman Michaels, another vessel, so he was probably a brother visiting the party. From what little we can read, the camp did not take responsibility for any of what happened, blaming it on bad weather and covering their tracks by installing robust weather systems. Definitely where the albedo alarm on site comes into play, and that's the key piece of information we needed. The game showcases a Moonlight Acres that already has an albedo alarm, a shelter, and a Civ mandate. This means that not only must the game depict events that occurred after the party, but the game's development, we could say, also started after the party as well. The photo at the end of the episode shows us Mary's fate, and we've known that something would happen to her ever since artificial computer learning. She was the one filming outside, so she was the one who was captured, becoming something else. We can even reverse the audio from the episode, which yields this. This whole situation was obviously very traumatic for Jack to have survived, and I think this is when he goes on to investigate what happened on his own, which leads us to World's Weirdest Animals and Wilderness Survival Guide. This is when he begins learning more about the iris, specifically the wood crawlers, nature's mockery, and fake people.
But this doesn't seem to go unnoticed because at some point we know something bad has to happen to him. This is also when we learn the ACL was basically just the iris talking through a computer the whole time, which explains how Mary was able to convey her thoughts in the original few iterations. It all comes full circle. Now you probably understand why I called this one of my favorite episodes of the series. It's really the first time that we can tie a bunch of stuff that we've learned together in an actually satisfying manner. But unfortunately, figuring out the chronology of the events doesn't actually do much to help us understand them. But that said, we still have 5 videos left to answer the remaining questions. So let's continue onwards to home invasion help. I'm sure you all remember Optica Video, right? They brought us games for kids, which was a lot of fun for the whole family. The tape itself, of course, is called Home Invasion, Help, and Safety. The aim of this tape is to ease stress and prepare you for home invasion. Who would have guessed? It starts with some pretty basic tips like, locking your doors and windows, then brings up the topic of security systems, mentioning that all of them can be disabled via blunt force, which doesn't really make me feel all that safe. And finally, it says sufficient lighting can deter some invaders entirely, since they commonly use the cover of night to sneak around. Okay, so far it's pretty normal, but you and I both know something's about to go down. Much like in games for kids, the tone shifts, and the video begins to describe common modes of entry. But it almost feels like these home invasion tips might be for the invader, with it now addressing people as prey that may be alerted by windows breaking. It also suggests vocalizing or making percussive noise against a door to draw out knocking. It's obvious now who this is for, but the way it's described almost makes it sound like they don't even know why humans come to the door when they knock. They've just observed that it works and repeat it to success. The next tip confirms exactly who this is for by suggesting burrowing in order to access the home and utilizing nests. Also, can woodcrawlers read? How would they even watch this? And we're then told what to do once the home has been entered. Locate prey, incapacitate prey, enter prey via proboscis. Delightful. Then the footage switches to that of a cameraman outside of a home. They enter the home and begin to look around, shining their flashlight at various knickknacks and doors before being startled by a sound. Knocking. They shine the light out the window before continuing through the house, entering a room with 2 humanoid figures made of red roots. In another shot, we can see them examining another of these root figures. It has a large hole in its chest, and compared to the other 2, this one seems to bear a little more resemblance to a human. After a while, the lone eye looks towards the camera. It's still alive. Leaving this area, we can see roots traveling upstairs. One shot points the flashlight towards the curtains to see dark tendrils crawl away after being spotted. After discovering he's not alone, the cameraman frantically tries to flee, but he falls to the floor. The woodcrawler strikes. Our second encounter with Optica Video, much like the first, appears innocent, but in reality, it's just here to provide instructions for woodcrawlers to invade homes. And with regards to the figures seen within the home, I think we can make a fair guess at these being victims of deep root disease. And one thing to note is that the main figure that we saw sitting in the chair looks as if they have a hole in their chest and appears to maintain some level of consciousness, or at least a basic sense of situational awareness. It's interesting that we actually had a very detailed description of how the woodcrawlers attack people, and it seems like the last step is to enter the person, which is probably how we get fake people. And just like with the gardeners, this is another point where the makeshift campaigns are going to come in clutch, because it reveals the identity of vessels to us. It's literally just anyone that has deep root disease.
What an unfortunate implication for the camp staff.
With regards to our cameraman, I personally think that this was Jack. The thing is, there was evident danger in entering and exploring this home the moment the root people were seen. Jack knew that these root people were here, because otherwise he would have just been picking a random house. But why would he try his luck to this degree? I'd say he was growing desperate for answers, to the point where his hardened sense of self-preservation was just gone. And how did that go for him? Just as we knew would happen, Jack seems to be with the Iris now. Right, so remember how I mentioned that I wasn't going to show the very first video on the playlist until later? Well, it's later. Channel surfing starts on channel 15, an advertisement for various Gemini home entertainment products, such as our solar system and Lethal Omen for Regnat PCs. We change to channel 16 and see Moonlight Acres gears up for summer events. Channel 17 has another Lethal Omen ad. Channel 18 has a disc from Harbinge, which I believe is the one for the sleep image visualizer. So far, this just feels like a trailer for Gemini as a series with no real spoilers, so why would I have kept it from you until now? Well, channel 19, In Memoriam, remembering Jack Wilder Dean. In the community post titled Missing, we can see a description of a manhunt that occurred following Jack's disappearance. A month after he disappeared, authorities had to call off the hunt because there were concerns of other disappearances. Jack went missing shortly after the release of his new special, which was probably Wilderness Survival Guide. The last portion of the video shows a few shots from other tapes, and the final image we see is the picture of Jack and Alex. I feel like it should be pretty obvious now why I didn't want to show this at the very beginning, but now that we're here, we find that there really isn't much else to it. So, let's move on to the final entry in the box set, Crusader Probe Mission. First things first, the Gemini logo is legit tweaking out right now. After that, we're introduced to another production company, Geneva, and they're gonna tell us about Crusader 5.
The purpose of this satellite was to take photographs of the planetary bodies that it passed on its 12-year journey. During this mission, it photographed Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. And after being told it first made it to Jupiter in 1982, the style of the tape flips.
And we're given a Crusader incident timeline of the events leading up to and during the Crusader incident. That sounds fun, I guess. In 1982, it approached Jupiter and took pictures of its moons, Callisto, Europa, and Io. Seems normal. Next on the timeline, we see a familiar and concerning date, December 1985. Leading up to 1986, Crusader approaches Saturn and photographs Titan, Iapetus, and Chiron.
You know what's funny? Chiron doesn't exist.
But anyways, September 1991, Crusader approaches Neptune. Empty. Cool. Time for the section where the video gets really weird. February 1992. Crusader approaches First Cluster. We're given a photograph of Themis, which, funnily enough, is yet another moon of Saturn that never actually existed. Then we see two moons merged together, Hestia from Jupiter and Cadlu from Uranus. Next we have this lumpy little guy named Cedo,
Another hypothetical but disproven moon.
and if you thought that was strange, it's about to get a whole lot stranger. December 1992, Crusader approaches. It photographs the moons of Iris, Cyst, Eucus, Macula, and Vitreus. It also photographs Umbilic, a moon that orbits Vitreus rather than the Iris itself. January 1993, Crusader experiences sudden gravitational pull. We see the photographs taken as Crusader approaches this massive object in space. Once Crusader passes the event horizon of the iris, we start to see some other things inside. And we're then told that Crusader has entered the Esophage Grove. We see a collection of tendrils suspended in the void with egg sac-like appendages at their ends. It seems like this may be where the gardeners come from, considering it's called a grove. It's still January 1993 and Crusader has entered the respiratory spinal complex. We watch as it travels through the lower sacralic throat. We hear what sounds like slow, deep breathing, confirming something you may have already suspected. This eldritch celestial body has biology and a respiratory system. Jesus. It spends a month here, but eventually it continues forward and approaches the conscious mind. Months pass, and we now see May 6th, 1993. Date sounds familiar. May 7th and 8th show a man sleeping in bed with a strange figure on his right. On May 9th, he appears to have woken up, but it's abruptly cut off. October 24th, 1993. Crusader signal lost for 7 months. And 7 months later, in May 1994, Crusader approaches Earth. Conclusion. Crusader's voyage through space has been thrilling for scientists and space enthusiasts alike, uncovering hundreds of new, exciting possibilities for humanity's future. Who knows what's in store for Earth next? Okay, well, before we touch on that bit, I want to refer back to something from Monthly Progress Report, specifically one of the iterations. This incident is probably what they meant by the vessel floats into the maw. Considering the iris possesses tangible biology, somehow, the maw was probably referring to the big opening at the front. It's equivalent to a mouth. Just before that, we get the line, "Mary sees the gateway die," but as far as we know from the Crusader pictures, Saturn's doing just fine. Maybe the iris did some off-screen mining and got rid of it while we weren't looking. Macula and vitreous, two of the moons listed for the iris, are also related to parts of an actual eye. It's possible that the things that we see here are moons of Neptune that were assimilated. Really, it seems like the entire goal of the iris is to assimilate other celestial bodies. The iris is clearly intelligent and it even possesses a biology. All signs point to it being alive. But in terms of how it acts, it really feels like a cosmic, unstoppable force of nature, more like a tornado than an evil being. Now, probably the most important thing about this episode is when the Crusader entered the iris' conscious mind. The photos we see are actually Jack's sieve, because the dates line up with what we've previously seen. But in the original clip, the well-dressed man is positioned on Jack's left, and the feed cuts out after knocking is heard, and the well-dressed man takes a seat. But in our new frames, the camera's different. The root person is on his right, no sign of the well-dressed man, but maybe he's just out of frame. And it almost even seems like the root person slowly extends their tendrils out toward Jack as he sleeps. And at the end, the sieve skips from May all the way to October for reasons I can't explain. Because the Crusader was likely using the iris mind as a medium for viewing the images, I think we were actually watching the iris watch Jack. Which to me is the explanation for why the context feels so different between the two different times that we've seen the same sequence. The last thing to note is that we never confirmed whether Crusader left the iris or not, and I'm inclined to think it didn't. All we know is that its signal began approaching Earth, and the 7-month disappearance of that signal matches up with the 7 months Regnad were waiting to see their client in person. Who knows what's in store for Earth next. Up until now, we've been covering videos in the box set playlist, but there is a second playlist in Gemini Home Entertainment called Library. likely in reference to the stash of physical media in the camp's administrative cabin. Among the videos in the playlist, each description is labeled as one of 4 parts, but currently only 1, 2, and 3 exist. They are titled Wretched Hands, Shifting Tendons, and Old Bones.
All that we've seen so far has been publicly available, something anyone could really get their hands on, but this is completely different. I think we're due some answers. So let's learn about Moonlight Acres Family Camp. Let's learn about how it all began. Wretched Hands begins with a screen plastered with the Moonlight Acres logo, clarifying that it is solely for internal use. And the following segment shows a live feed of Lake Mountebank in Canada. This takes place approximately 25 minutes before the first attack. At first, the footage seems like a typical weather forecast, taking place on December 24th. We zoom in and see something abruptly emerge from the lake. Next, we are shown a letter written on May 3rd, 1946. Curtis, come down to the camp this weekend. Fulton and I have devised a plan on how we can continue to uphold the deal without giving in to these beings' abhorrent demands. Richards has seen a bear lurking near the boys' cabins. We will go out and shoot it. If the statue wants a sacrifice, it will have to settle for this. I will be a pawn no longer. Curtis, I tell you this with complete certainty. If I could do it over again, I would never have made that deal. Glenn Arthur. Next, we have an unknown day in May of the same year. Wretched hands tap my window. A stranger's fangs scrape the walls. We then see a picture of a creature in the forest, and it's labeled as right thigh. It zooms in to get a closer look, highlights a shape in the mass, and gives it a name. Bo Nadler. But that's not all. Lloyd Michaels, Christine Hoyt, Darcy Ogden, Mary Dean, and finally, Glenn Arthur, all listed as having been assimilated into the creature. Photo comparison suggests exponential increase in organism deterioration since mutation. Organism has since lost all resemblance to a bear. For the first time in a while, we finally have some more information regarding the ominous deal. And as it turns out, the camp's original administrator, Glenn Arthur, did regret making the deal, but for whatever reason, it took him damn near over a decade to get to that point. So he drums up the bright idea to offer the statue a bear instead, but as we know, this backfires immensely. The result? A mutated eldritch beast, officially known as the Wretch. In the video, we see 2 separate letters written by Glenn Arthur, both in May. With regards to the second letter, these are lines we've seen before on the signs in Lethal Omen, and this is their origin. I think this letter was written in a panic as he was hiding from the thing that he had just created. And as we know, hiding didn't do him much good. Because the video calls the Christmas party the first attack, this means it's actually happened at least 3 times. The first time with Glenn Arthur, the second time at the party, and at least one other time. And I think we've already seen one of these other attacks. If you think back to the end of Camp Information video, you might remember a creature that didn't quite look like anything we had seen up to that point. But what if I told you it was the Wretch the whole time? And the reason why I suspect this to be a later attack is because we hear an albedo alarm, which they didn't have until after the party. Calling it the first attack also means there weren't any between Arthur and the party, which makes sense if the camp was closed. The Christmas party was probably one of the first things they did when they decided to reopen. And funnily enough, Alex is the only person who wasn't assimilated and is never known to turn into a vessel. And here he is, pictured with Jack. He seems pretty important, and if I had to offer a blind guess, he's probably the current camp administrator.
Something might be up with that guy.
It's really gratifying to finally learn more about Moonlight Acres, but there's way more for us to explore. Let's move on to Shifting Tendons. We start off with a magnified view of a root. After zooming in further, it appears to expand before almost coughing up some kind of substance, but we're abruptly cut off. Sleep image visualization, Barry Johnson. Began at 2:30 a.m. July 10th, ended 2:34 a.m. July 10th. Next, we have a holding room design, which for whatever reason seems to replace the existing shelter, even seeing the aluminum hemisphere removed in its construction. Barry resides within the cell, and Levi Jacobs stands on the other side. A metal door with a feeding slot separates them. This explains our view from Barry's sieve. Finally, there's an escape hatch. June 16th, 6 days into self-quarantine, placing Barry's sieve as likely the first night's sleep he got within this chamber. Here we see the camera looking into the room, while music plays on a radio. Next, we see the WDH logo, which you may remember from Deep Root Disease. We're shown several illustrations with a normal-looking human in Figure 1, but as it progresses, we see the roots slowly envelop the body, progressively worsening. 27 days have passed, and it's now August 16th. We hear clattering, pained groans, creaking. Returning to the WDH figure, we can see the human decay further as the roots fully take hold, and the figure resembles nature's mockery. September 7th, 59 days in. Staff put on protective suits and prepare to enter the holding room after the estimated incubation time. You can see Barry has been reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or at least he was, before he turned into this clump of roots. We see a few different shots of his body before turning the focus to what's left of his face. Gene Davison performs an interview with Barry to determine his psychological state.
Can you hear me? Do you know who you are? We can hear you.
The interior of Barry Johnson is discovered to be occupied. Camp staff initiate protective safety measures. Looks like old Barry Johnson was the most important vessel. Did you guess right? Here's your cookie. All jokes aside, I think it is crucial to point out that Barry self-quarantined, giving up his body for research knowing he wouldn't come out the other side, and this shows a lack of malice among the camp staff. With that in mind, now feels like a perfect time to bring up another community post, this one titled Condemned. From what we can piece together, this is a letter from the head of security, or previous head of security, Levi. It talks about deteriorating and research that they should have left to the WDH. He explains that watching Barry go through this made him feel sick to his stomach every time he had to look through the feeding slot. He announced that he was leaving on the 10th and Jean agreed to take over, which is why she's the one performing the interview at the end of the video. Levi continues, saying, "This deal cannot continue. We're no different from the fools who agreed to it in the first place. When you open that godforsaken door, you'll know what to do." To the left is a map of the camp, and underneath it all is an illustration of the rear and side of a brain, likely part of the study done on Barry's mind, or lack of it. So, the deal is clearly not a secret among the camp staff, and there's even at least a couple people that are very unsatisfied with the circumstances. And I think this leaves us wondering, once again, why did they make a new deal to begin with? And the thing is, at least for now, we just don't know. I want to take a moment to briefly touch on Barry's condition as well. We've seen victims of deep root disease maintain some kind of consciousness before, but if Barry is any case to go off of, it seems like they can't actually express any complex thoughts in this state. All he was able to do was repeat what was said to him. The craziest part, though, is that the hole in his chest was occupied by something, and the only thing that I can think of that can fit in there is a woodcrawler. Surprise, surprise, this is the secret third way I think woodcrawlers can be made. And I think this is where we finally get our answer on what being a vessel is. And this didn't just happen to Barry, it happened to every single person that we saw in camp information video. Lastly, I want to talk about the title of the video, a term we've seen twice already. Before we lacked the context, but now we know it's a literal term, a process that happens to anyone infected with the disease. This episode really did give us a lot, but there is a little more information left for us in our final episode, Old Bones. Alright, well, next time, let's dive in.
Unnatural. What's happening to the tissue is not only entirely unlike what's typical for the disease, it's completely counter to it. Instead of attacking foreign tissue, it welcomes it. The bones don't decay. Organs blindly fuse. Bulbs fester and swell. Tissue refuses to die. It is hypermetastatic. It is at this point most analogous to a tumor. I would not speculate on the states of the minds within.
We're then treated to some old excerpts from Glenn Arthur's journal. With it, we get our earliest point on the entire timeline, May 13th, 1935. He writes, "I have seen a vision." We see imagery of Neptune sending down the beam and striking a mountain. He questions if they are heavenly visitors. 2 days later, he writes, "Angels visited me while I slept." And based on his sketches, I think we know exactly what they are. The well-dressed men. Who am I that the hosts of heaven would commune with me? The unconscious mind is a door and I hold the key. O dream speakers, name yourselves. May 23rd. Visions from my angels. A half-living thing grows outside camp. A statue carved in their likeness, arms reaching out like a child's. June 4th. I have been offered a new covenant. Then, 6 years after their first appearance, the deal is sealed. Then we see some shots of the camp, back before it closed originally. We even get to see the statue that Glenn Arthur referred to, the same one from Lethal Omen. 5 years later, in May 1946, the deal is broken. We see the men loading their guns and heading to the water. Yeah, we know what they're doing. And suddenly, alarms begin to sound. We see a body shrivel up and an image of the brain with the amygdala highlighted, the section responsible for processing fear. Iteration 381. Wretched hands tap my window. A stranger's fangs scrape the walls. Sleep beneath the feeding grounds. Cancer shares a dream. Iteration 4. Jack heard it again. There is a voice from space. Jack, do you see me? I have become something else. Iteration 671. I am still in here, relic of the faithless day. Don't leave me, you bastards. Old bone grows. We cycled through some shots of the camp at night. Eventually, we settle on a window. Arthur's face appears amidst the flesh of the wretch, still conscious, constantly in seething agony, and trying desperately to communicate, even now. But he can't control whether or not he stays, so the wretch decides to leave. In Old Bones, we finally get to see exactly how things began. Glenn Arthur was the first human to make contact with the iris, and these dreams seemed to foster Arthur's fascination with the unconscious mind, no thanks in part to his assumption that these were heavenly visitors searching for him specifically. And although there was plenty of evidence for this already, Old Bones confirms that all of the people inside of the wretch not only can convey their thoughts through the iterations that the iris is communicating through, but are still 100% conscious. But that's the obvious revelation we can get from this. I also want to take a second to analyze the iterations a little deeper. The title of the episode is a fragment of the statement from the iteration, Old Bone Grows. This refers to Glenn Arthur's bone, or really, the bone of anyone who merged with the wretch, because now we know that it will refuse to decay no matter how much time passes. The bone will just fuse with what's already there and stay forever. And we can explain some of the other lines here now too. Sleep beneath the feeding grounds refers to the wretch lying in wait under the lake. Cancer shares a dream is a callback to the presentation comparing it to a tumor. The portion that says shares a dream might be referring to the fact that all of the people inside of the wretch now share a consciousness with the iris. Relic of the faithless day may be referring to Arthur himself. He is the relic stuck inside of the wretch, and the faithless day was the day he decided to try and betray the deal. I honestly think that Arthur's maintained consciousness throughout all of the decades of him being stuck with this bear is probably the most horrifying concept that the series has ever introduced. Not even to mention the fact that he's also stuck there with 5 other people? Rough, man. And with that, we've covered the final video currently available to us. And regrettably, we're missing the final part of the library, even going on 2 years since the upload of Old Bones. But either way, we've reached the end, and we finally have all of the information we need to piece together Gemini Home Entertainment. Just kidding.
Huh?
Sorry, there's a few extra community posts I haven't shown you yet. I'll show them in order and just gloss over the ones we've already covered. First, we have featuring, which just shows the Gemini logo, but with some funky colors. This was the first of the posts and is probably just there to showcase that the posts would be used going forward. Next, we have missing, which I already showed you. Then there's visualized, which just shows a computer from Sleep Image Visualizer. Next, we have one that we actually haven't covered, defect. We can see a list of questions regarding recalled items, and whoever's filling out the form didn't tell the consumers about the recall, is still holding on to the items, but has recalled 150 units, and they don't plan on giving them back despite the fact that they were told to. They also state that they're not responsible for the creation of the product. So far, other than the refusal to return the items, this seems fairly normal, but then it starts to get a little more interesting. According to their answer on question number 8, there have been reports of illness or injury related to the product. Now, what could this possibly be referring to? Well, when they were asked to provide additional details, they only wrote, "The children began to scream." Oh, looks like our favorite tape distribution company is experiencing some legal trouble. Next, we have Download Now, which is a link to the download for Lethal Omen. Extraction shows a root shortly after being removed, and it looks similar to the one we see in Shifting Tendons, but either way, it's a root and it's been extracted. We've covered Offer already, but the next post, Leak, we have not.
It shows a picture of roots labeled H12. There isn't a whole lot to go off of, but the word leek reminds me of a quote from Lethal Omen, "Growing cracks leak with red." Next we have graph, which shows a graph. Not really sure what it's for. Maybe it's a woodcrawler nest, I don't know. The last one that I have not covered yet is delays, which brings us back to the recall we just spoke about. It sounds like someone bought the Games for Kids video and was upset when it told their kids to go into the forest at night and scream. And you know what? That's fair. But she ran with this and went on the news, and then other weird things on the tapes were found. A lot of people thought that the videos with the iris creatures were just a hoax. Gemini claimed to have no knowledge of the issues and delayed production until the problem was solved. I feel this sort of tragically suggests that all of Jack's work to inform the public has kind of been for nothing. But now I'm just left wondering, well, if the tapes were tampered with, then how did that happen? Who did it? How did this fly under the radar for so long? Were the tapes shipped out like normal and then somehow cosmically altered retroactively? That or Gemini's just covering their ass and feigning ignorance, right? Either way, I think this whole situation serves as an in-universe explanation for why box set ends at Crusader probe mission. They just stop putting things out at some point. For one last thing, on some of the posts, the Gemini channel itself also mimicked an ACL by letting other people's comments act as prompts to get information. Nothing huge was generated from this, but I just thought that it was cool and that I definitely had to mention it. And now we've actually gone through everything Gemini Home Entertainment has to offer. Give yourselves a pat on the back, just to make sure to go to the doctor if you feel any weird lumps back there. But of course, this wouldn't be a minaxa video without a timeline and theories section. I have been analyzing the story as we've gone along, but to wrap things up, I figured it'd be nice to give a brief, and by brief I mean not brief at all, explanation of the series timeline. So, here we go. This is the Iris, a gigantic alien eyeball thing that mutated Neptune with plans to take over the solar system, and right now it's working on conquering Earth, and here's how it started. It used Neptune as a lens to beam down what I believe is the first gardener. This is Glenn Arthur, a guy who thinks angels look like this, and children look like this. In 1930, a lovely little camp named Moonlight Acres is established. Nothing but good old-fashioned family fun will ever happen here. Trust me. Our friend Glenn Arthur is the camp administrator. 5 years later, in 1935, he has some dreams about Neptune sending a space beam down to Earth, and some guys in fancy suits show up and start bothering him about making a deal. Whether he knows it or not, this deal entails making human sacrifices to a weird tree. Also, I would imagine it's around this time where people at the camp start seeing skinwalkers in the woods, which we know are actually just woodcrawlers. These little freaks are quiet hunters that enter your home, enter you, and then pilot your body, turning you into a fake person. In the meantime, Arthur has gotten a little fed up with his nightly visits from the well-dressed men asking him to make the deal. He finally relents and accepts. Mistake number 1. 5 years later, Glenn is no longer happy with the deal. Or maybe he never was. Then he's like, screw you guys, if you want a sacrifice, you can have this bear. Mistake number 2. Rather than turning into a woodcrawler, it gets a custom mutation that lets it assimilate things into itself, allowing it to grow big and strong. Its bones never decay, and its tissue refuses to die. And we're told that these properties are explicitly contrary to what you'd find in deep root disease, an iris-related affliction that won't be properly documented until some decades later. Anyways, tangent aside, the cancer bear absorbs Glenn Arthur, and from this point on, I'll be calling the cancer bear the Wretch. Understandably, the camp shuts down for a long while, and a bunch of time passes, decades actually. And it is during this time that the woodcrawlers and gardeners would spread past their origin point at the camp, becoming a widespread problem throughout North America. Sometime in the 70s, the Crusader 5 probe is sent out to take pictures of celestial bodies farther in the solar system. It doesn't reach Jupiter until 1982 though. Jumping to the 80s, the Iris takes another shot at working with humans after the whole bear betrayal thing. Regnat Computing is happy to help, as long as the Iris lets them be better than their competitors. Isn't capitalism wonderful? It is worth noting that they won't publicly share their research until later in the decade.
In direct contrast to Regnad, another company named Harbinge has begun to notice the need for defenses against what the Iris has in store for Earth. It's still unclear how they obtained all of the knowledge that went towards their research and development, but they clearly had a big budget because they put out an ad in 1985 for people to test the Sleep Image Visualizer, a device that translates your dreams and unconscious mind into physical images. And in that same newspaper, there's another ad requesting a videographer for a Christmas Eve party, and the pair, Jack and Mary Dean, are just fit for that job. As far as I can tell, the purpose of this party is to celebrate the reopening of the camp after its extended closure. Why the hell would you ever reopen this camp, you might be asking? I don't know. But based on later evidence, it might be because they were forced to make another deal. Or maybe it's just a party. Either way, knock knock, who's there? It's the cancer bear. The wretch jumps out of the lake and joins the party. And a bunch of people get absorbed, including Mary. May they rest in peace. Except we know they're not resting in peace because they're totally still conscious inside of the bear. The only survivors are Barry, Jack, and some guy named Alex who we know basically nothing about. But we do have a picture of him. After the whole evil Christmas Eve party incident, the camp decides to blame it on the weather and install some safety gear provided by none other than Harbinge. In the meantime, Regnad shows off some cool stories their new totally artificial intelligence was able to come up with. And these iterations contain shockingly accurate details describing Jack and Mary. Speaking of Jack, just like the Crusader, he's also been taking some totally normal pictures, and in the process, he's been finding some really weird animals. After losing Mary, he devotes his time to trying to uncover the truth and inform people of the dangers infesting Earth. Circling back to the camp, now that they've got their shiny new safety gear, they're ready to reopen, for real this time, and they really want some new campers. Don't worry about the skinwalkers, the sacrifice tree, or the lights in the sky. Just come enjoy some canoeing. Let your kids scream in the woods. But don't answer the knocking at the door. And don't worry about the wretch, he don't bite. Now, unfortunately, we know some members of camp staff did answer the door, and as a result, they acquired deep root disease, later documented in a film by the Warner Department of Health. It describes how the disease is contracted and progresses, but refuses to tell us the protective safety measures. Yes, I'm still upset about that. We literally never got to see what those were. Then we have a bit of a gap. We leap forward to 1991, and we find Barry self-quarantining in the shelter after realizing he has contracted the disease. And after 2 months, he's deteriorated so much that he loses all resemblance to a Barry. And he might be a little pregnant. Who's the father? This guy. Probably. Mpreg aside, it seems like the camp staff are in way over their heads and they're only continuing this deal with the Iris out of tragic obligation. Also in September 1991, Crusader 5 just found Neptune. No, there's no Neptune, right. Alright, February 1992, Crusader 5 approaches the first cluster, a collection of very lumpy moons that the Iris seems to have fucked up. By year's end, it pulls up to this party. Happy New Year! January 1993, Crusader gets to explore the inside of the Hungry Eye itself. Then February rolls around and Crusader approaches the consciousness of the Iris. Who knows how that works? Parallel to Crusader's mission throughout the early and mid-90s, Jack has been trying everything that he can to inform the public about what's going on, including crucial information about the Iris and its servants in tapes that appear otherwise benign. And this seems to end with his wilderness survival guide because shortly after he's reported missing. But that's the story the public knows. We have a better idea of what happened to him. Because in Home Invasion Hell, he stumbles into a home with root people and gets clip-farmed by a woodcrawler. And although it's not exactly clear what happens to him following this, I think this is where we see his 3-day sleep. Through the Iris, Crusader 5 sees Jack during his time asleep and documents the images of the Civ. Alright, October 1993, Regnad is back, and their artificial intelligence got way better. It can even make video games now. Oh, by the way, their fancy AI, yeah, that's just the Iris, and it's showing up in 7 months. That might suck, but at least we have a cool new game to play. Lethal Omen is available now. I believe that the game depicts Moonlight Acres not as it was during development, but in the near future, following a steep decline. The camp is completely devoid of any real people, and the entire thing is clearly shut down considering the locked front gate. Newspapers lie on the ground suggesting disappearances, and the abrupt cancellation of the event that made them popular. Also left behind is evidence of a Civ mandate for everyone on the grounds, likely to catch deep root disease early. If the normal ending is meant to be understood at face value, it may convey a horrible fate for Earth.
And finally, Crusader 5 begins its trek home from its mission,
which mysteriously coincides exactly with the 7 months Regnad was waiting for the iris to show up. After the tape is published, Gemini Home Entertainment faces public backlash and indefinitely ceases their distribution. But I have a feeling with the iris' impending arrival, they're never gonna get the chance to resume.
Man, humanity is so cooked.
A natural consequence of the series being unfinished is an abundance of loose ends, but there are 2 big theories that I have a lot of faith in. And the first of these 2 theories has to do with the running theme of the unconscious mind. Starting from early in the series, we're told that we should not answer the knocking at the door, and then we're shown a list of camp staff that became vessels after doing just that. This whole time, I was convinced this was a physical event that occurred at the camp, and it never quite made sense. I couldn't piece together when this would have happened. I was resolved to assume that it was just vague and left it at that. But I was wrong. During the end of the editing process, I made a connection that I had been missing the whole time. The door is a metaphor for the unconscious mind. I mean, Arthur literally states this. Imagine how stupid I felt. The knocking at the door to the unconscious mind is the iris attempting to infiltrate, and it manifests in the mind through the well-dressed men. I mean, dude, the one in Levi's Civ is literally peeking from behind a doorway, and Jack, well, it's already in his mind. Once you answer the knocking at the door, once you let them in, it's already too late. And once this happens, you stop dreaming. You get stripped of your humanity and you're transformed into a vessel by deep root disease. Your consciousness slowly fades, but all the while you can feel the pain. Eventually, you're reduced to a form literally described as a mockery of nature. And this very phenomenon is exactly what the sleep image visualizer was designed to protect you against: the opening of that door. Of course, this isn't to say that the act of knocking at the door isn't something woodcrawlers actually do. They do that. We have proof that they use this to gain access to your home. The term simply has 2 meanings, both literal and metaphorical, but both actions result in a similar outcome. And that's what I feel Gemini is about: the futile struggle to maintain what it means to be human while faced with an unstoppable cosmic threat. The second theory I have starts with a simple question. Why is the series even called Gemini Home Entertainment in the first place? Well, obviously the series is named after the in-universe distribution company, but I want to focus on the use of the term Gemini. As I mentioned earlier, Gemini is the constellation of the twins, so narratively it would make sense if it represented some kind of pair. Well, there's 2 pretty obvious candidates, right? Jack and Mary. But I haven't discussed in detail yet what their relationship to each other may be. A lot of people assume they're married, but as far as I know, there is genuinely 0 direct evidence for this within the series itself. Even the fan wiki confidently lists Mary as his wife, but hey, that's fandom wikis for you, right? To me, it feels as if their relationship has been left purposely vague, so what if they were twins? As the story goes, Castor and Pollux, the twins, were both born to the same mother, but one twin was immortal and the other was mortal. How did this happen? Well, if you know anything about Greek mythology, you can pretty easily infer that it's all Zeus's fault. One son was from the king of Sparta, and the other was Zeus' offspring. At some point, the mortal twin Castor was killed in battle. Pollux was really bummed out about this, and asked his dad to let him share his immortality with his brother. Zeus obliged, and they became the constellation Gemini, spending eternity together in the stars. At least, that's the basic idea. So let's take the bones of that story and see how we could apply it to Jack and Mary. I don't think it would be a stretch to equate the iris to a godlike figure. And after Mary was absorbed into the wretch, she became functionally immortal because of her connection to the iris. This would place Jack as the mortal twin in need of saving. Mary speaks to Jack from within the hive mind, saying, "Jack, do you see me? I have become something else. But something I haven't really ever touched on is the first line. Jack heard it again. I believe that this message was repeatedly relayed to Jack during his 3-day sleep. And through the Iris hive mind, the vessel by the foot of his bed may even have been his sister reaching out to him, begging him to join her in immortality, but at the dire cost of his humanity. In the very last frame of his Sib, Jack appears to wake up and face the figure, and that's exactly where his story ends for us. Jack is with us now. Jack is us now. With that, we have finally concluded our dive into Gemini home entertainment. And let me just say, this is hands down the most difficult project I've ever had to do for this channel. I kept changing my mind and finding out new things about the series halfway through the editing process, forcing me to go back and work on things I thought were finished, and if it weren't for a very special someone helping me with a bulk of the script writing as well as theory crafting, this video wouldn't exist. So, big shout out to my girlfriend, and her socials will be in the description because she plans on streaming soon. And of course, I have to shout out Remy for making this series. Like, what a crazy feat of creativity, dude. If you're watching this video, which I have a feeling you might be, good fucking job, man. I've also got a Discord server, so if you want to talk to me, come on down. And for everyone that made it this far, thank you so much for supporting me. Anyways, that's gonna be all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.